In the conversation we're having this month about the best Toyota models of all time, there would be a vehicle I would be tarred and feathered for not including. A legendary vehicle not only in the conversation for best Toyota in many people's minds, but in the conversation for the best sports car of all time, period. Because, to cut right to the chase, on this episode of Toyota History Tuesday, we're talking about the Toyota Supra. We'll touch on everything from its prehistory to its legendary Mark IV and the controversial return in the Mark V Supra. This may be a Toyota page, but I'm not afraid to get into the controversy surrounding that vehicle and people's viewpoints towards it. But let's start at the beginning before we get there with the Toyota Celica. In 1970, Toyota would launch the Celica as a sports sedan that would replace the Sports 800. It would basically be a sporty coupe adaptation of the Toyota Carina. Come 1973, Toyota would launch a body style that they invented called the liftback version of the Celica. What a liftback is a fastback vehicle, which means that the top of the roof slopes all the way down to the bottom of the vehicle in one continuous slope, but was also a hatchback, which meant that the rear lifted up and down. So a liftback is a fastback hatchback. This liftback style would be an incredibly innovative body style and be iconic for sports cars of the 70s. The second generation of the Celica would arrive in 1977, but would also feature a trim level called the Celica XX, titled that in its domestic market of Japan, or the Celica Supra everywhere else in the world. With the Celica replacing the Sports 800, the Celica Supra was being implemented sort of as a spiritual successor to the legendary 2000 GT. Basically, the 1978 Celica Supra was a slightly lengthened version of the Celica liftback, featuring an inline-six engine like what was in the 2000 GT. This vehicle, now considered the first generation or Mark I Supra, had 110 to 123 horsepower and featured some of the luxury sports car features of the time, like powered windows, powered locks, and cutting-edge four-speaker stereo systems. Within a few years, 1982 would bring the next generation of the Celica, but would also drag its little brother along, releasing the second generation of the Celica Supra. This is what we now consider the second generation Supra, also called the Mark II. This is not to be confused with the Toyota Mark II, which is its own model altogether, but this is the Toyota Supra Mark II. Still based on the Celica, there did come a redesign to the Supra, and it had a less boxy look. Hop up and down retractable headlights, and two different versions, the L and the P versions. L meaning luxury and P meaning performance. Horsepower fluctuated from 145 to 178. But come 1986, it was time to push the Supra out of the nest. It had earned its repute as a powerful vehicle, and it was time that it got its own nameplate, not tied to the Celica. This would result in the third generation Supra, or the Mark III. This was a distinct turning point towards high performance. While the Celica was switching to front-wheel drive and had inline-4 engines, the Supra was the sportier rear-wheel drive and had inline-6 engines. It featured a naturally aspirated 200 horsepower version or a turbocharged version of it that hit 232 horsepower. It also featured many new technological advances, including anti-lock brakes, an active suspension system, wishbone suspension on the front and the back, and would feature a Targa top in 1991. Only as an option, though. The Mark III also had an engine option called the 1JZ GTE, a twin turbocharged inline-6 engine that pushed out 276 horsepower. Additionally, it was highly tunable and alterable to make even higher horsepower numbers. Having been greatly improved from its previous generation and considering it had a Targa top option, it was laying the groundwork for one of the most legendary Toyotas ever. A quick note before we jump into that Toyota. From this point all the way up until the modern day, of course taking a gap when the Supra wasn't a nameplate in Toyota, the Supra has continually been used for motorsports applications, and this would sort of kick off with 1987's victory in the Japanese Touring Car Championship. Anyway, without further ado, in 1993, the fourth generation or Mark IV Supra would debut. A sleek new look was partnered with Toyota tripling down on performance. It had two engine options of the legendary 2JZ engine, both of which were 3-liter inline-6 engines, but one of them had a twin turbo system. This resulted in horsepower numbers ranging from 321 to 326, could go from 0 to 60 in 4.6 seconds, had a top speed of 160 miles per hour, and featured things like another Targa top option, one that is quite famous, lower weight, a spoiler, upgraded gearboxes, and upgraded transmission. Notably, although very heralded for its performance features, The Mark IV Supra set a record for the fastest brakes of any production car in 1997, a number that would not be broken for 7 years. This effective braking system was inspired and borrowed from Toyota's Formula One branch, where a huge enthusiasm would develop on top of the performance features of this car would be in the realm of tuning. Similar to the Mark III Supra, the Mark IV Supra could be highly tuned to push out much greater horsepower numbers due to the strength of the engine block and the strength of the cylinders. Basically, in making some alterations to the turbochargers and some other internal mechanisms, you could take a stock 2JZ engine and push it to 700, 800, 1,000 horsepower. The Mark IV Supras is heralded as one of the most popular Toyotas, partially due to its appearance in Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift and a variety of video games and movies, and it certainly belongs near, if not on, center stage for the conversation of best Toyota. That being said, in August of 2002, this Mark IV Supra would be discontinued worldwide, although it had been discontinued 4 years earlier in the United States market. Why? Why would they discontinue their Halo car, one of the best cars they've ever made? Well, like usual, low sales. Sports coupes were sort of filtering out of style at that time, and it's estimated that only around 12,000 Mark IV Supras were sold in the United States over 6 years. But, as we know, this is not the end of the Supra story. After around a decade of rumors, potentially related concept cars, and sightings of mysterious prototypes, on January 2019, the Mark V Supra was unveiled at the North American International Auto Show. This vehicle featured an inline-six engine that was twin-turboed and hit horsepower numbers of 382. It sported a 0 to 60 time of 3.8 or 3.9 seconds, making it the fastest production Toyota of all time in 2019. Despite these high performance numbers and some very, very great fanfare celebrating the capability of this vehicle, including a 10 out of 10 rating from Car and Driver, the Mark V Supra was received with much controversy in the Toyota enthusiast community. It was co-developed with BMW's Z4 model and features a BMW engine, the B58. Also, many of its suspension components are BMW's. Deep enthusiasts about the Mark IV Supra, a vehicle that many consider not only the best Toyota of all time, but maybe the best sports car of all time, considered it a slap in the face that Toyota would take this nameplate and not even put a Toyota engine in it. Why did Toyota not make the 3JZ? Well, it came down to expense. Developing a complete new engine, especially an inline-six, which a Supra would have to contain, would take great capital to develop. Would it be worthwhile to sink all this money into prototyping for a vehicle probably destined only to sell a couple thousand units worldwide? That's why they partnered with BMW, who is known for their high-performance engines in sports cars. But in discussing with many Toyota enthusiasts online and in person, on Facebook or in the dealership or out at the bar or whatever, I've discovered a little bit of a consensus about this vehicle. It seems that no one seriously believes that the Mark V Supra is a bad vehicle. I mean, let's consider it. The performance features are the best Toyota nameplate ever released. It's got under a 4-second 0 to 60 time, has great handling, and true car critics raved about its ability to handle and perform both at a high caliber. So it's not the performance features and capability of this vehicle that people have an issue with. It's not the price. It's not really even the look. It might be that it was lacking a manual transmission, although that is going to be alleviated soon. The consensus I've collected from this community is that they called it a Supra. For instance, the Toyota 86, that a lot of people call a Toyobaru, is a mixture of Subaru and Toyota featuring a boxer engine. Although inspired by the Toyota-made AE86 Corolla variant, this was given its completely own model name. To be honest, in that regard, I understand that frustration greatly. For what many consider to be the best Toyota of all time in the Mark IV Supra, its successor was a partial BMW. So I genuinely do understand and empathize with that train of thought. Maybe even I potentially agree. But it's important to remember that despite the controversial nature that some people hold towards this vehicle, that it's still a fantastic vehicle. Let's think about this. The super high-performance Lexus LFA supercar that Toyota would make would have a 0 to 60 time only 0.2 or 0.3 seconds different than the Mark V Supra, despite costing about 5 or 6 times more. And in its applications in motorsports, it's already dominated a couple competitions, notably in the Fuji season. It has also won 6 out of 11 races in the 2019 NASCAR season. These applications in motorsports are going to only continue as the years go on. So is the Mark V a Supra? That's up for you to decide if you think so. but it is still a fantastic performance car, and it brings us up to date on the Toyota Supra. Is the Supra the best Toyota ever made? You tell us. But I want to thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Mitchell. I'm here at Fred Haas Toyota Country. Of course, we have some of those Mark V Supras here, if that's something you're genuinely interested in. But anyway, I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks a lot.